If you're like me thinking being a mom in 2023 is hard, you ain't seen nothing yet. Captain Sofia Rosales-Scaetna with the Fort Wayne Police Department in Indiana was just finishing up about a year's worth of physical therapy after a horrific car crash while serving on the force when she got the call her husband, Tony, needed rushed to the hospital due to some chest pains. Little did she know at the time, Tony wouldn't make it. There to help her pick up the pieces were two children not yet her own. 3 days after losing her husband, she went ahead with their plans to adopt two middle schoolers. She doesn't sugarcoat it. She's had good days. She's had really bad days. Some days when things were so darn bad, she could barely breathe. But through it all, she always showed up. She always put one foot in front of the other. And her journey as a widower has brought her to us here on the News Mom podcast.
She mops the floor while mopping up D.C. This is News Mom.
Captain Sofia Rosales-Scaetna with the Fort Wayne Police Department in the hot seat this week. Welcome to the News Mom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to really emphasize Captain with the Fort Wayne Police Department because, again, it doesn't really matter where anyone's listening from, whether that be Pennsylvania, Kansas, Georgia, or right here from Indiana. The fact that you are involved in law enforcement makes you a really unique mom figure. I feel like I should be really transparent and let listeners know that we know each other.
Yes.
Yes, we're colleagues. I would consider us friends. I would actually consider you kind of a mentor of mine. I don't even know if you know that. But yeah, definitely a mentor of mine because, as I said, you are in law enforcement. You are also a single mom. You're the only parent in your family, which we'll get to that. And you also happen to be an adoptive parent. You actually adopted your two kiddos. So you are unlike any other mom I have ever met in my 34 years of living. I have met other moms who are in law enforcement. I have met, only parents before. I have met someone who's adopted children before, but I've never met someone that hits all three. And man, Sofia, right off the bat, I can't imagine some of the challenges that you face as a parent versus some that other parents probably don't face.
It's been a long journey. In 2017, I lost my husband suddenly to a heart attack. No signs, no symptoms, really, that stood out anyway. During that time, we were in process of adopting some children that we had come across, and we just knew that immediately they were our kids. So they were at our house for that weekend when he passed. And
hold on, so you're getting ready to adopt these two kiddos, which, by the way, they were how old at that time?
My son was 11. My daughter was 12.
That's the other thing, too. You run into adoptive parents, and it's usually babies or small toddlers. Very seldom do you hear these stories about, middle school age children being adopted.
Yeah.
So your kids, they were at your house the weekend your husband passed away?
Yeah. My son and my husband had gone on a fishing trip up to Michigan to catch some walleye and some coho, and they had a great time, caught a lot of fish. My husband probably battled, and is probably what precipitated the heart attack, was battling this fish that he had caught, this large fish. And he came home that evening. I went to work on the police department. I was third shift at that time. So
you're overnight at the time?
Yeah,
okay.
Overnight. I went to work. He went to bed. He called me early in the morning. Wasn't feeling well. Got him to the hospital. He ended up dying a couple hours after being in the hospital. The kids were at home. They were just moving in. They were coming for permanency on Wednesday. He died on Sunday. We had gone through this adoption process for probably 6 or 7 years. We were foster parents for that time, trying to find kids to adopt. What you probably don't know, and I don't think a lot of people know, is I had about 3 miscarriages. I was able to get pregnant. I just couldn't carry. So, after that third one, I told my husband, I'm like, I can't do it anymore. I can't go. Those emotions that you go through with that kind of thing is guys, awful. Mm-hmm. And I just told him I couldn't do that anymore. So he's like, whatever you want. If you don't want to quit trying, that's fine. And I'm like, well, so we talked about adoption, and he's like, okay, that's great. He goes, I just have one thing. He goes, we're not adopting out of country. There's kids here in this United States that need our help. And
Amen.
If we adopt, we're adopting here. I'm like, done.
So obviously, and I hate to bring up the age, but that's just the world and the reality that we live in.
Yeah.
Thinking that most people actively choose to adopt younger kiddos. Was that ever a factor for you guys?
When we first started getting kids, I never wanted an infant. Just because I was past that. I was older too. So I think I was 40-ish. Actually, probably a little bit younger, 39. When we started getting kids, and we never had an infant. We just had, I think, 2.5 was our first placement. Was a 2.5-year-old, and she just stole our hearts. She was just such a great kid.
I don't know how foster parents do it. I don't know how you.
I don't know how I did it either. When we did, we ended up losing her. She went back home, and then we got her a couple more times as mom fell out of back into the system, but we kept in touch. And even though we weren't her foster parents anymore, we still took her. We paid for preschool. We had her. She lived with us while she went to preschool. Mom came and visited whenever she wanted. We had a really good relationship altogether with her. She was really a phenomenal child. Before she left our house, she wasn't 3 yet. She was already reading. So we were reading to her, and she was already formulating the words and seeing the words and saying the words. Had an extensive vocabulary. She was just a really smart kid. So we wanted to foster that and make sure that she had an upper hand, because where she came from wasn't, mom didn't have a lot. Mom had a lot of issues going on. Dad wasn't in the picture. So it was just a lot of things against her. But if she had a good education and learned how to read at an early age, we knew she would be successful at whatever she did later on. And even at school, the teachers noticed, and they really took her under their wing and fostered that. So she was reading at like 6th grade level by 1st and 2nd grade.
Wow. But you obviously...
But we lost her.
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking because...
Yeah, how did you... I mean, you just said what you fostered for 6-7 years, I think is what you just said.
Yeah, we had several kids in and out of the house at that time.
How does your mama heart take that? I couldn't do it. I don't know how foster parents do it.
It's very difficult because we were in the process to adopt, but we were only getting placements to foster. So... It was just frustrating because we weren't getting any adoptable kids. And, we always joked, if you wanted your kids back, make sure they got placed with us, because within a month or two, they were always back home. And I realize that is the ultimate goal of the foster care system. But sometimes I think they just give them back prematurely before the issues are worked out. And so it was just, that back and forth, and we had kids, lost kids, had kids, lost kids. And so it just wears on your heart, and we weren't really happy with our local DCS office, so we stopped. I told my husband, I'm like, I can't take one more lie. I can't take one more, we just didn't tell you because we just didn't think you needed to know, kind of thing. So I said, I'm done. And then ironically, a guy at work whose wife works at another county DCS approached me, and we were talking, and I told him what happened. He goes, why don't you talk to my wife? And she goes, I'm like, okay. And they knew her. I mean, we'd gone to parties at their house and stuff, and she was very nice. So I talked to her, and she's like, yeah, we've got tons of kids, adoptable kids, foster kids, whatever you want.
Wow.
I can help you.
So then you met your son and daughter, and you knew?
We knew right away. We knew the day they came to our house for the first visit. By the time we were done with dinner, my husband and I both knew.
Were they in foster care then at the time?
Yes, they had been in foster care for a long time. So they were just in the process of terminating parental rights. So they were already in that process by the time we got them. So we knew that they were going to be adoptable.
So, Sophia, there's no other way to paint this picture other than it's quite tragic.
It is. When I look back now and think about it, I'm like, yeah, it absolutely is.
That's why, again, it's the most remarkable story I think I've ever heard. So your kiddos are there. You and your husband are about to sign the papers to make it all official. They are moving in. This is a weekend. Your husband passes. You're supposed to have these kids officially as of that Wednesday. Yeah. Can you walk me through that conversation with them? I mean, here you are. I can't even imagine the level of grief that you were experiencing, let alone all of the other feelings that you experienced at that time. Yeah. But then you have these 2 kids.
And they were so sweet. They were just the sweetest kids. And my son, he really hadn't had a dad for most of his life. And the dad of his dreams. I mean, my husband loved to fish. My son loved to fish. He wanted to learn how to hunt. He wanted to do martial arts, loved the Pittsburgh Steelers, Alabama football. Everything that my husband loved, my son loved. It was just like they were born to be together. So that was what was really hard. I wasn't in grief for myself. I was in grief for them. odd as that may sound, but because I knew the life that they were coming, I guess, to accept was not going to be what it was going to be.
They essentially, I don't mean to put it this blunt, but they'd signed up for two parents.
Yeah,
right?
they did.
And that's all that they've ever probably dreamed of and longed for. I've not met your kids. I don't know that, but I
think that's what every kid
yeah.
wants, right? They just want two parents that love them, a father and a mother, and especially if they're a boy and a girl, each gets their own, mom and dad. But I will say, there's a reason why it takes two parents to make a child, because it takes two parents to raise a child. It takes a male figure. It takes a female figure. I truly believe this in my heart. Doesn't mean that you can't raise a child on your own if you're a female and you can instill good values and all those kinds of things. It's just harder. It's harder to understand what boys go through or what girls need from a father. And sometimes I think my son's missing out on that because he doesn't have one, even though I have strong male figures in my life. My brother, my father. I have really good friends that are they take him, they do things with him. I had a friend, one of my best friend's husbands coached him in Little League. And so I've had people step up, but it's not the same when it's not the father. And so that conversation I had with them at the time, I came home and I told them what happened. And, I think they were just stunned. Like, he was just here. I just went fishing with him. And, she goes, I just said goodbye. We were just joking. And then he's just suddenly just gone. But I did have that conversation because I didn't know if they wanted to move forward with me. I knew I did, if that's what they wanted, but I knew that they were expecting two of us. So we had that conversation, and I told them, I said, look, if you're in, I'm in, because I know you were looking for two. It's just going to be me. But if it's not what you want, stay here till you find it. I'm okay with that. If you're in, I'm in. And they both looked at me and said, they're in. So it was just one of those things where we picked up the pieces together, and they really, really helped me through that process. I think I helped them. Didn't always get it right. Boy, there were some struggles there.
Well, I can only imagine some of the struggles that you have. Take the whole law enforcement thing out of it, because I do think there is a different dynamic for parents.
There is a total different dynamic.
That are in law enforcement. But just take that out of it, because not only did you adopt your kiddos, but you now are a single mom. From the get-go, did you have worries about, you mentioned, how important a strong father figure is to the family unit. Did you have doubts in yourself or worries in yourself that, can I do this as a single mom?
Yeah, I still have doubts every day. Yeah. Every day when I have interaction with my son, I'm like, I always feel like, what is he missing? What am I not providing? And as part of that male bonding that males should have with someone, I think every parent feels like, am I doing it well enough? Am I good enough? Am I causing more harm? What am I doing?
Like you said, I don't think that is ever going to go away. I ask myself that every day too.
And I think it's, tougher for me, and I won't say tougher for me because I don't know other people's situations, but what's different for me is I don't know, I know a little bit of where they came from, but I don't know the extent of what they've been through. And that for me is, as an officer, I want to know. I want to know every detail because I want to know how I need to help. And so we had some real behavioral issues for my son early on. I got him in therapy right away. Those things turned in about a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it took about a year. But the difference between biological and adoptive parents is that where your kids come from. Your family history. Your medical history. Your mental history. I don't know anything about.
Are you allowed to know that as an adoptive parent? How does that work, especially with medical?
Yeah, you would have to have a relationship with the biological parents.
That's the only way you can't access that information via hospital records or anything like that?
They can tell you, like, hey, they've had a tetanus shot or they've had their vaccinations. But I don't know that they get into, but what I'm looking at is, historically, what is my parents? Does my mom suffer from depression or anxiety or those kinds of things? There's just no way to know.
This is not at all the same. But I genuinely can't imagine, because we've always adopted pets. In my home, we've always adopted dogs. We're one of those things, there's so many strays out there, let's adopt. That's just something that we do. And we had a particular dog at one point that was scared of my husband, just completely petrified of males. But again, it's not that they could tell us anything about this dog's history, but obviously he had our dog had a terrible experience with males, whether that was he was beaten, kicked, or what, neglected, what have you. And it took us a really long time to get our dog not only okay with my husband, but then my husband's friends or other male figures that came into our home. And that's, again, not at all the same.
But kind of the same.
But yes, but I just can't imagine it on the scale of your kiddos.
So take that, and it's kind of like, I'm not comparing my son to an animal, but
right.
it's
And
kind
I'm not
of like
either, but
my son doesn't know how to express himself emotionally, right? He doesn't know how to.
He's never been taught to.
Yeah. And if you look at society, we really don't teach males to express themselves emotionally, right? They're supposed to be tough and strong and all the time. And so it's hard for a small boy who's been through so much and then to come out and express how he's feeling. Well, what does it turn into? It turns into anger. It turns into outbursts. It turns into things that are masking what the root problem is. So once you find the root problem, and I think for him, honestly, I think it was loss. It was grief. It was grief over, leaving his family unit, coming to our family unit. It was grief of losing my husband. It was grief of the only father figure he was looking forward to. It was all this grief, but it came out in different ways for him because he didn't know how to express the grief.
Yeah, but you obviously noticed all that. You just said you got him in therapy right away.
Yeah.
What was his reaction? I mean, I can't imagine that being an easy conversation either. Oh, hey, honey, think it's a good idea. Maybe you have some therapy. I mean, how does that conversation get conducted?
Well, I am me, so it just
just kind
told
of
him,
spilled out.
I was like, hey, we're gonna do this, and I think in some ways my son is still afraid of me, so he just kind of goes
afraid
along.
of you. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So he just goes along with what and he knows I'm not here to hurt him. And honestly, we were in therapy.
So he was receptive of it. Obviously,
he went. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how receptive he was, honestly, because we went and. I swear to you, at the end of the year, we were coming up on a year, the therapist comes to me, he goes, so how's he doing? I'm like, well, actually, he's doing good. Grades are good. He's really interacting. He's making friends. He's not getting in trouble, those kinds of things. And then he's like, well, you might want to save your money because he's only said about 20 words the entire time he's been here.
What?
And I'm like, are you kidding me? He goes, no. And I'm like, but his behavior is changing. He goes, that's all you want to see.
Yeah.
So he's been listening. He's been listening to things I've been saying. And I think, honestly, a lot of it was fear of losing me. I mean, he's waiting for the shoe to drop, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's lost his
everything.
Regular family. Now he's lost the dad. Now he's just waiting for me. And we're going through... as a police officer, you're seeing this uptick of police violence, and he's seeing it on social media. He's seeing it on YouTube. He's watching these police officers get killed all over.
He's probably scared for you to leave at the front door every day.
Yeah. But he would never say it, but he was. And so as a kid of a police officer, I think it just has a different level of worry for your kids, even though you don't think that they even notice or even care, but they do.
Were your parents in policing?
No.
So even you couldn't really full on identify with that feeling of fear.
No, I couldn't.
When you walked out the front door.
No, I had a pretty normal childhood. My parents are still married after 54 years. So I never been abuse, neglect. Those are things that are foreign to me. So, I'm dealing with all these things in my own kids, and it's eye-opening, and it's a real learning curve for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of parents struggle. My daughter's only 2.5, so I haven't had to walk down this road. It doesn't mean I won't have to. But I think a lot of parents struggle with that point of, when do I seek professional help for my child? And it seems like, again, that really wasn't even like, it almost sounded like you didn't even debate it. Yep, he needs some therapy. I need to get him in. I mean, what kind of advice would you give to other mamas who now, because I think that would be a really challenging conversation to have with your kiddo.
But should it be? I mean, I think we've come to view therapy as some kind of like, there's something wrong with me. When sometimes it's just trying to figure out your little puzzle inside your head and putting it together. I see a therapist through work 4 times a year, just to do a lot of work therapy through there. But a lot of times we just end up talking about my family. Because I have family issues just like everybody else.
I just say, don't we all?
Yeah. And, I don't want anyone to misconstrue that when I talk here that my life is perfect or my kids are perfect or they don't get in trouble or they don't cause me grief and worry, anxiety, because they do all of it. But I just tried to raise, for as little time as I had them, 2 people that would just be productive citizens.
Yeah.
And I hope that I did that. I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. Well, could I do things differently? Absolutely. I think we all can look back and like, oh, I should have done that differently. I should have yelled then. I should have just done this.
But I don't think you realize, Sophia, that it goes a long way that you're sitting here. I don't want to say I don't know if this is even the right word, normalizing therapy. Like, hey, it really is no big deal. Like you just said, it's learning how to put those puzzle pieces together. And, I've heard actually you use this example, so I'm actually stealing your words. You go to the doctor when you have a broken arm to figure out how to fix it and put it back together, right?
Yeah.
You want it to heal. You want it to be strong. You want it to be able to function properly. Same thing with your brain, with your heart, with your mind. Sometimes you need to go to therapy to learn how to make sure those pieces are properly put together so you can be a positive contribution to society. Like you said, just raising a good person.
Yeah. And, I've learned a lot over the years, and just in policing, a lot of my focus early on was mental health. We helped start the CIT program on the police department. So we focused mental health, went to Memphis, and we looked at their program and brought it back here. So I really had this mental health kind of purview, if you will, over my career. And so I've just taken that into my personal life. And I might not have always been, my husband's death changed me, for sure. Yeah. For sure. I am a lot more empathetic. I am a lot, I know people aren't going to believe me, I'm a lot more calm. I don't think people will believe too much of that,
I think I should have met Sophia in 2015, 2014.
And then as I've worked through a lot of my own grief, and I did become a yoga instructor a couple years ago, and that training there probably opened my eyes more to me and who I was than anything I've ever done in my life. That was probably 3 months of intensive therapy that
you didn't know you needed.
Yeah, I didn't know I needed it. Well, I probably knew I probably needed it, but I was reluctant to do it.
Yeah.
And not because I thought there was some stigma, but I just didn't have time, right? But at the time I took yoga instructor school, I felt my life was out of control. I felt broken. I felt like I couldn't function properly. And if I put more and more thing on my plate to keep myself busy so I didn't have to deal with everything else I needed to deal with, I was going to break. Mm-hmm. So I was glad that a friend of mine talked me into that. Like the best thing I could have done. And it's just working through emotions and identifying what those emotions are. Because, man, I could be angry, but that's not what the emotion that's bothering me is. It's something else. And what is it? So learning to identify that, working through it, and letting it go.
Well, that's the thing about yoga. It almost forces you to face all the crap that you don't want to face.
Yeah.
Because it's just you. Yes, you might be in a class with 20 other folks, but it's just you holding that pose, and there's silence.
It's nice.
It is quite nice.
Yeah.
But it also can be really terrifying for someone who isn't comfortable with being silent in their own head.
Yeah. And that's a lot of people because we are so inundated with everything. These phones are just taken over our lives and everything on it, and what we see and what we hear and what we're doing with them. And it's just overwhelming, and it's even more so for our kids, right? So we sometimes we give them these phones and here, go take that and go, and I can see it, right?
Yep.
One thing I cannot stand is to go into a restaurant and see everyone at the table on their phone and not talking.
Yep.
So that was always a rule.
We've lost the art of the dinner table.
Yeah, and that was always a rule at my house: no phones at the table. Except Mom, because she might get paged. But I'm not on it.
Right.
It's there in case I need to hear it.
And moms could be life or death here. Mom needs to have her phone nearby. Yeah. I think that's
fair.
Mom
keeps the roof over our heads.
Yeah, exactly. That
but
too.
There's nothing important that you guys need to be on your phone for.
You said it, with you being in law enforcement, you've been in law enforcement for almost 30 years now.
God, don't make it sound like
Sorry. Okay, 28 years, right? Is it 28 years?
Okay. It'll be 29 this year.
20. I was trying. I said almost 30. But, and you just said it, your son, and probably your daughter does to some extent too. I don't know. Your daughter's what, 18 now? 19?
Yes,
18. So how old's your son now?
He'll be 17 in a couple days, yeah.
But so he dealt with a lot of that fear and anxiety every time you walked out the front door simply because of your job. Is that a fair statement to say that kiddos that have parents as first responders probably do deal with a lot more of fear and anxiety than other kiddos?
Absolutely. Today especially, because they see it. They're inundated with it. Even when we went through the protests here in town, I remember my daughter never told me, but I could see it in her eyes. She was scared for me to leave.
For folks who aren't from this area?
Sorry. So during the George Floyd protest, Fort Wayne had an eruption for a few days here that took us outside of our normal duty hours. So I was working I think that week I worked 80 hours in a week, just keeping up with media and keeping up with things that were going on here in the city. We had our our riot squad out. We had protests throughout, damage, all that kind of stuff throughout Fort Wayne. And I could see it in my daughter's eyes when, like, she was almost teary-eyed when I would leave. She was scared. She was scared for me because she saw everything that was going on around the country. And while ours didn't get to the level of some places, I mean, it very easily could have. And so I think there's a heightened level for kids of law enforcement that people don't understand. And I know that I've had friends who've retired, and they've had conversation with their kids about retiring, and they're like, thank God.
Wow.
Thank God, you're finally done. Now I can quit worrying.
Yeah. I would imagine that's same for kids who have parents in the military, any kind
absolutely.
of active duty. I would assume it's the same. What would be some of your best advice then, Sophia, whether it's yours or that you've heard from other parents that are also first responders, active duty, what have you, kind of in that same field when it comes to talking to your kiddos about this fear and this anxiety, because it's real?
I think you have to acknowledge it, acknowledge what they're feeling, because they're not you. Or I say, honey, I'll be home. I can say that, but I can't guarantee that.
But you don't know that. Yeah.
I mean, even if I wasn't an officer, I can't guarantee that. But so acknowledge it, hug them, love them. My son now, my daughter's not home anymore, but my son now, when he walks out that door every single time, I love you. Mm-hmm. He says it or I say it. Mm-hmm. And then we respond back, I love you too, be careful. But I want him to know that I genuinely do love him. Mm-hmm. And he may not have ever heard that for most of his life, but he's hearing it now. Ad nauseum, probably.
Yes, Mom, I know. Mom.
But I just want people to acknowledge whatever your kids are feeling. Because if you kind of tamp it down or poo-poo them, they're not going to come to you when they need to come to you.
Especially a boy. And let's say he's having anxiety. That would probably be a harder emotion for a boy to confide in his mom about.
Yeah. And I always, you can tell with your kids. Mm-hmm. You can tell when they're going through something. I always know. Sometimes I know when he needs conversation from me because he'll come and seek it.
So read the signs. What are some things, again, you're in law enforcement, obviously. I think we've made that pretty clear. And you and I talk on a regular basis. There's a lot of scary things that I know come across your desk. There's a lot of scary things that come across my desk in terms of the media. What are some things that you think parents should be just hyper vigilant and aware of right now?
So much. I think we're all worried on some level of parents of something happening to our kids. But really, it's the things that have always been present. We're just hearing about them now because of social media and the news cycles 24 hours. I mean, when I grew up, at midnight, the little red, white, or the multicolored screen came on and the tones came on, the national anthem.
You blink and there's a new news story we all need to be aware of.
So you see these things coming on and it looks like it's a lot, and sometimes it is. But I think we need to be aware of our children's friends, know who they're with, know where they're going. I don't consider that helicopter momming, to want to know where your kids are and who they're hanging out with. You should know. My son's on Life 360. Do I check it all the time? Absolutely not.
I don't even know what that is, Sophia. What is Life 360?
So it's basically a GPS app that you can track your kids. If you buy it, you can see how fast they're driving in their car. Do
they know that this is on their phones?
My son does know.
Okay.
Yes. And you know what? Honestly, I don't really check it all that much, but it just gives me a little bit of peace that I know where he is. Always making sure you're talking to your kids about drugs, especially with the fentanyl we have in town. The xylazine that's coming in, every marijuana too. I mean, it's all bad news.
How do you talk to them though? Again, you got a young boy who's 17.
Yeah.
How do you talk to them to the point that they will actually receive it and they aren't like, yeah, I know, mom.
Well, they're going to receive it like that regardless.
Yeah.
I know, I won't, blah, blah, blah. But then they do. Because they're kids, right? They're going to experiment. But now experimentation can be deadly.
It could kill you, yeah.
Yeah. So I just have these conversations often. Like, look, and I lay it out. It's like, no, I don't want you to not do it just because it's illegal. I explain to them why. Like, look, most of this stuff you're going to take isn't what you think it is. It's this. And I present them with the facts that I know because I'm a police officer. We've had, 700 overdoses in the last year. And of that, we've had 294 people die, so I present these facts and they probably are like, oh, rolling their eyes at me and stuff, but it sinks in I know it sinks in because we went through a year of therapy. He didn't say a word and his behavior changed.
That's true. Yeah.
So they're listening. They're probably going to roll their eyes at you. They're probably going to do whatever. But I always take the opportunities to, to talk to them about whatever it is. Well, like my daughter, we talked about domestic violence, we talked about rape, we talked about all sorts of things through music. You can do that through music, through shows on TV, things that are happening on the show. You can talk about it after the movie. We talked about suicide. You know, she watched 13 Reasons, and we talked about it. We talked about so many things. And I want parents to understand that just because you say something, you're not planting seeds in your kid's head. If you talk about suicide, you're not going to make them do it.
Well, I think that's a big concern.
It is, but you're never going to make someone do something just by talking about something. That may be the first time you're acknowledging that they may be feeling something like that, and then they may feel more confident or comfortable talking to you about it. So I never miss an opportunity to talk.
Let me ask you this then, because you brought the 13 Reasons Why. That's the show you're just talking about. This a couple of years old, I think now at this point. But the show is essentially all about this young chick who committed suicide and kind of leaves this trail of clues, right, for her friends to find out why or what happened to her, something along those lines, right? I mean, it was years ago, I feel like. How do you, as a mom / woman in policing, view shows like that? I mean, you just said just because you talk about it doesn't mean you're planting seeds, but to some level, do you feel like those kinds of shows, because to me that show, I only watched a couple of episodes because I had to see what everyone was talking about, and to me I thought it was awful, because to me I thought it almost glorified suicide and made it look like something that, ooh, I should do this because then I'm going to get all of my friends to rally and find out what happened to me. And
two things. I don't necessarily care for shows a lot of times that glorify things, over-sexualize things. It's not my cup of tea for kids. As adults, you know, I like raunchy humor as much as the next person. But for kids, this is where we come in as parents. This is what we have to do. Our kids are going to watch this. If it's at my house, if it's at a friend's house, they're going to seek it out because we're telling them not to. I would have done it. Yeah. You know, for me, it was the show Airplane, right? That old.
Sorry, Sophia. I'm only 34 years old. I don't know that one.
So all you older moms may know. But it was a really controversial. It was like a bunch of.
For me, it was MTV. I wasn't allowed to watch MTV.
See?
So when I'd go to my friend's house,
you'd watch it.
Correct.
Wouldn't you?
Correct.
So knowing this, we have to be aware, and we have to then initiate those conversations with our kids about the topic. You know, if you don't want them to watch it, explain why. But you better have a reason why.
Yeah.
Because just like because I told you so is not going to hold water, and they're going to do it anyway.
Better. I mean, that should be on a bumper sticker. You know, you got to give them a reason why.
Yeah.
I'm already discovering that. My daughter's 2.5. I'm like, oh, honey, don't touch that hot stove. Why? I'm like, because it's hot. Why?
Because you will burn your
Because I
hand.
turned it on, it won't give you an ouchie, you know? Man, I spend my living with the show that I do. I host a conservative news talk radio program, and I feel like every day when I open my mouth, I need to know why. Why I believe what I believe, why I stand for what I stand for, right? And I live my life by that mantra for the most part. However, now that I've had a child, it suddenly opened this new world of why to me. You know, all of a sudden I need to be able to explain why you can't touch a hot stove. It's very new territory for me. And then I've all of a sudden been thinking about well, I'm going to have to be able to explain to her why she can't watch this show. Or I don't want her to, because you just said, she's probably going to watch it anyway. She's going to watch it. But I better be equipped with the why, and I better get equipped real fast.
And you need to talk about the subject. So it's not just about the movie, it's about the subject. I think we do kids a real disservice, and I see this happen when there's a suicide, when someone dies by suicide at a high school or a middle school. Man, they don't want to talk about it. The kids are talking about it, but the administrator's like, oh, we don't want to talk about it because then more people are going to do it. Yeah. No, this is the moment where we have to talk about our kids, talk to our kids about this subject, and let them get those emotions out, because if we keep tamping them down, they're going to find a way to release those emotions in a non-healthy way.
Okay, this is kind of a good segue to something I wanted to get in with you. We all know just recently we had that mass shooting in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Which I think there can be a conversation there, too, of how you talk to your kiddos about that. And I would love to hear your mom / law enforcement officer thoughts on that. But I came across this report, and it kind of blew my mind. And it actually made me think of you, Sophia. And it said that parents are starting to opt their kiddos out of active shooter drills and lockdown drills at schools because of the trauma it's causing their kids. And when I first saw this, I was like, you what? Because to me, it's kind of like what you're talking about. It's kind of like we're just sweeping it under the rug, and it's like, okay, we're not going to talk about it. We're just going to not even acknowledge that this is a real thing. And so I wanted to bring that up to you because, A, from a law enforcement point of view, this kind of blows my mind, but also from your mama point of view.
They intersect for sure.
Yeah, they for sure intersect.
And I'll say this: if you're opting your kid out of active shooter training, are you opting them out of tornado and fire drills as well? We've never lost kids in a fire at school, but yet we do this 2 and 3 times a year. Have this huge fire drills. Would you keep your kid out of that for the trauma they may experience in a fire drill? No. But more often we've seen where we've had active shooters at schools. Why wouldn't you want your kid prepared for that? And what an awesome opportunity when that day happens to talk about.
Right, to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, and what are you fearful of? Mm-hmm. And be honest with your kid, because they're talking about it at school. You don't think they've talked about this shooting in Nashville at nauseum? Mm-hmm. And this violence that we just have perpetuated in music and movies and just in general, in YouTube, in Facebook, you can Facebook Live someone killing someone, So it's all around them, but no one's talking about it. No one's talking about the person doing it. We get caught up in the mechanism of how they did it.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of the reasons why
they're
did
doing it. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we do our kids a real disservice. I've always talked to my son. I still talk to him because he's still in high school. And we have this conversation. I'm like, honey, I said, if you can get out, get out. Mm-hmm. Go through a window, and I tell him, I'm like, take a desk, throw it through the window, get out. If you are in a position to help other people, help them. Mm-hmm. If you can safely do it. If you cannot get away, then you need to fight.
You got to fight like hell.
You got to fight. We talk about it, not a lot, but when things like this happen, I just
so
kind of remind.
You are having these conversations head on with your kiddos. But now, granted, your kiddos are 17 and 18.
Yeah, they're older.
Would same advice apply? Let's say if you had a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old?
What I would tell them would be probably different in a different way.
But you'd still attack it head on.
Have the conversation, yeah. I don't think that there's any bad that can come of having a conversation.
Something I've been, just poring over this. Again, my daughter's 2.5, and unfortunately, a lot of times you hear our generation of kiddos, the lockdown generation. Whether that's true or not, we could debate that another day, but that's what a lot of young kids are being called these days, or the lockdown generation. So I know at some point I'm obviously going to have similar conversations with my daughter about whether it's active school shootings, fire drills, what have you. Same kind of concept, these lockdowns. And all I keep coming back to is that no matter what, I want to be her safe space, whether it is to talk about a lockdown or some TV show. I always want to foster this environment that I can create a really safe space for her, that we can talk about things from lockdowns to suicide to gender identity. I don't know, whatever it may be. But I'm telling you, I'm like already trying to prep myself now to be that safe space for when it arrives.
And it is so hard.
Yeah,
it really is. Because I can be
Sophia.
Judgy as any get out.
Yes.
I try not to be.
I try
really
not to
have
too.
tried not to be so judgy, but man, I can be set in my ways too. And my ways might not be my child's ways. Mm-hmm. My choices are not my child's choices. We can do everything that we can do, and then our kids can still make poor choices.
Yeah.
But they do that because they're kids.
Right.
And it's taken me a long time.
But they've always got to know you're the safe space they can still come back to,
yes.
you know?
Right now, I'll be honest, I'm struggling with my daughter and making poor choices. And I don't condone the choices. But they're hers to make, right? She is now 18 years old. She's making her choices. Mm-hmm. All I can do is say what I need to say, look, I don't agree with that. You're going to get hurt, but they're your choices to make. You have to figure it out. But when you want to come home, I'm here. And the door's always open for you.
Well, that's the thing about this podcast, though, too. I want it to be that safe space for mamas, soon-to-be mamas, people who maybe aren't even moms yet, because there are going to be a few of those down the road, too. This being that safe space, because you just said it, hey, I'm having struggles with my daughter. I didn't do it all right. Hey, I can't always figure out how to be a safe space. Yeah. To say it all and admit it all, because we've all been there, done that, or it's going to happen to us one way or the other. Sometimes it gets frustrating. Like you said, I'm not here to put on this front like I've done everything right and I'm perfect. But so many mamas do that.
They do.
And
I'm telling you right now, if someone tells you they have it all together, they figured it out, their kids are perfect, they are lying.
Yeah.
And they're presenting this fake front. And
when you see that perfectly, pictured home of the living room on Instagram, there are toys and crap in the corner that they shoved in there.
I mean, we all shove it in our closet, right? When people come over, don't open my closet if you come to my house.
Just close the door. Just
don't open my junk drawers because they're heaping with crap.
I'm like, don't go upstairs. Don't go to the whole upstairs. Stay downstairs. Yeah. Really quick, when it comes to, I know we're kind of talking about trauma, and it got a little deep, Sophia.
Yeah.
When you're talking about trauma, though, particularly, shootings, this mass shooting that we were talking about in Nashville, in terms of just young people, and it's coming across your desk, so to speak, not that you're behind a desk, but coming across you every day in your line of work, and you've been on the force for almost 30 years, how do you feel like trauma has played a role in impacting your young kiddos, from 25 years ago to now?
I think unresolved trauma is probably the reason why we have the issues that we have today that's permeating our society. We have a whole generation of kids being raised by grandparents because their kids are addicted to drugs.
Yeah.
Just the addiction factor that we have in this country, and we are seeking more and more drugs. We are the most drug-seeking society in the entire world. I firmly believe that. We think that there is a drug for every ailment or every hurt and every ouchie and every low day
every
that
feeling,
we have.
yes. Yeah.
And instead of just letting those feelings, and there's a time and a place for meds. I'm full for it if you need it, but you're allowed to be unhappy. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to have a bad day. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to cry for a couple days. Mm-hmm. When it gets into weeks or months, then you might have a deeper issue you probably need to seek medical treatment for. But man, we get into this place where I don't want to be sad or I don't want to feel this, so we just drug it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's manifested into the big crisis that we have right now with drugs and why we're such a drug-seeking nation. And it's ruining our children because they don't learn resiliency. They don't learn how to cope. They don't learn what to do to cope or how to deal with these things or how to work through them. All they think is, oh, I saw mom take a drug, so let me take a drug.
Right. That's a good point.
And kids, I'll tell you this right now, and I'm a firm believer in this, kids will never do what you tell them. They will do what you show them. Mm-hmm. So you have to be that person that they look to and say, my mom does it this way. That must be the way I need to do it.
My favorite is there's this this video that went viral on social media, and it showed this mom eating potato chips, right? Telling her kiddo, which maybe was 4 or 5, that you need to eat your vegetable. And the whole time the mom is eating potato chips. So of course the kiddo doesn't want to eat vegetables. Now I know that's kind of a silly example, but it's the same exact thing.
Look with the phone.
Yeah.
Just don't be on your phone for 8 hours a day. Meanwhile, I'm texting while I'm telling my kid not to be on the phone. They have to see us emulating the behaviors we want them to have, right? Yep. So if I want my kids to exercise, I better be getting my butt out and exercising.
It's funny you say that. So we are Peloton people in my house. I'm a biker. I used to be a runner my whole life, but it took a toll on my knees, my hips. I mean, I'm 34, but my body. I mean, I know I'm still young, but my body wasn't hitting the pavement anymore. So I've been on the Peloton now for a couple of years, and some friends of ours got our daughter. A little mini Peloton. It's not really a Peloton, but a little workout bike. But we actually put it into the room that we work out in. She comes in and sits on her bike while mommy works out or daddy works out. We always try to bring her in when the other one's working out because it is really important for us that she sees an active lifestyle that her parents have, that her parents are healthy and not sitting around eating potato chips. Not that we don't, but I'll be honest, I'm like going over to the pantry and sneaking a Rice Krispie treat here and there because I don't always want her to think that's what you snack on.
But she hears you.
Oh, I know.
She hears you in there with that wrapper. She's like, Mom, what are you doing?
What are you eating? What are you eating? Why? Yeah. Why? That's what it is. Why are you sneaking that? Really quick, I know, if you really know me, you know this about me. And I know you know this story, Sophia, too, but my husband and I have always thought about adopting. In fact, when I was 14 years old, I went on a mission trip to Honduras and stayed at an all-girls orphanage. And it completely changed my life at such a young age. In fact, I walked away from that experience thinking everyone needs to go on a mission trip at some point in their lives. But I walked away also from that experience. God had put it on my heart hey, adoption might be the route for you. So in fact, my whole life I grew up thinking I'm not going to have biological children. That was something that I didn't think that God had destined for me. I thought that at a really young age, and I thought I was supposed to adopt. And so fast forward, I've already said it, I have a 2.5-year-old. God obviously had different plans for me, which praise the Lord that he did, because I can't imagine my life without my baby girl. But here we are, my husband and I, she's almost 3, our daughter, and talking to you, and you obviously adopted your kiddos. So for someone who is like me contemplating it, I'm not saying it's something we are going to do. I'm not saying it's something we're not going to do. But I know there are a lot of people out there who either A, can't have children for whatever reasons that may be, or maybe God has put adoption on their heart as well. What would be some of your final thoughts, best advice, best practices, whatever it might be when it comes to adopting kiddos? Do you recommend doing the fostering first? Because that scares the heck out of me.
It's hard. The fostering is hard. I'm not going to lie. Just because you never know if they're staying or going. And it just gets hard.
I once you do it. I don't know that I can do that.
And once you bond with those kids, it's so hard because you know what they're going back to. And not to say that parents can't get it together, because I've seen several that have. But 9 times out of 10, they're back in the system, as I've seen and experienced.
I also can't imagine bringing in a foster child now with my daughter at 2.5. Like to me, like now would not even be the right time to foster, because you just don't know what. Like you just said, you don't know the background.
You don't know the history, what they've been through, only what they've told you, or only what they think they know. And as I've learned with my own kids, there was much more that I didn't know that came out through therapies and stuff like that. So I would say I would encourage people to adopt. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's a gift to not only to the child, but to yourself as well, because they were a blessing to me when I needed a blessing. And but I would caution people, find out as much as you can, and don't be afraid of the older kids. I didn't get a lot of time with my kids, and they kind of set in their ways, so it's a little more difficult sometimes. But man, those older kids, there's a lot of love there, and the experience isn't always great, but it's not like that with a biological child either.
No, I had zero. No. I had never even changed a diaper until I had my child.
Yeah. So, and I still don't. So yay. But I like them walking and talking.
Get toddler experience with baby girl if you want to.
But they're just fun. Kids are great.
Kids are amazing.
And they add so much value to your life. And even if that's not the way to go, then think about being a big brother, big sister, a mentor to some kids. Because right now, these kids desperately need good people in their lives. And I would encourage anyone that has the time to do that to really seek that out. They need good foster parents. If you're from Indiana, the Indianapolis 500. The kids in foster care in this nation would fill that stadium up, and there still wouldn't be enough seating. There'd be 100,000 seats left that they don't have. So there's that many kids in foster care. So people really need to step up and provide those homes.
Well, Sofia, I meant what I said at the start of this episode. You are a colleague of mine to some degree, but I also very much consider you a friend and very much a mentor. I think you are a remarkable woman. You are an incredibly intelligent woman, and you have one heck of a story. Secretly, or maybe not so secretly, because I've said this to you before, I hope that someday we see you make a run for office, hint, hint. You truly are just an absolute warrior, and I thank you for being here to share with such transparency.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and we didn't get to everything I wanted to talk about, but I guess I want to say thanks, and thanks for doing this, because I think it's important, especially for other moms, to know that we don't all have it together.
No.
We're not all perfect. Our kids are doing stuff that we don't even know they're doing until we find out, a week or two later.
Yeah.
But it's nothing we haven't done either. So let's take it easy on our kids, make sure they're healthy, happy, and make sure they're loved.
Yeah. Loved, that they feel safe. Man, I think that's my biggest frustration as a new mom. A lot of times as moms, I think we can feel insignificant. Our identity gets buried in being a mom. And if we don't have so many followers on Facebook, or if we don't have the perfectly staged living room, or live in a certain area of town, we get discouraged, like we're not doing good enough, or I'm not raising my child where I want to, or how I want. Like, it can be kind of discouraging and sometimes feel lonely, when the reality is we're all in the same boat.
We are.
We're all having these same struggles and challenges. So hopefully this is the place where we can talk about a lot of those things. Yes, we're going to have a few politics here and there, which we didn't get too political.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. We didn't get too knees deep into politics, but we're going to keep the theme going here of all things motherhood, soon to be moms, women who aren't even moms yet. They're going to be joining us here on the News Mom Podcast. If you have one takeaway from today's episode, I hope that it's the message that no matter what you're going through as a parent, as a new parent, as an adoptive parent, or a wannabe mama, that there clearly is light on the other side of all of that turbulence you're going through. I truly can't imagine the same week that I'm officially about to adopt 2 kiddos that my husband dies of a sudden heart attack. I can't. I don't want to imagine that. It's hard enough being a parent in 2023, but then have to do it solo and to do it as gracefully as Sofia has done. I think it's remarkable. I think it's brave. I think it's beautiful. The way that Sofia was able to find her feet. And I think if she can find her way through all of that turbulence, hopefully you can find your way through whatever season you may be in right now. And please, 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 I actually want to echo something that Sofia said. Please, please, please talk to your kiddos. I know it sounds like such a generic mom PSA, right? We hear that all the time from teachers, administrators, law enforcement. But, you know, in today's day and age, we live in a world that's all about do you, be you, whatever makes you happy on the inside, whatever makes you feel good on the inside, right? We are surrounded by that kind of messaging day in and day out. Our kiddos are absorbing that kind of messaging day in and day out. And truthfully, I think that kind of messaging is such a disservice, not only to our kiddos, but also to us as parents. Because yes, it's important to feel good about yourself on the inside, but the problem with everyone walking around thinking that they should just feel happy and be happy all the time and do what makes them feel good is the fact that that's a myth. People aren't walking around just endlessly happy all the time, right? I mean, I try to find joy in everything, but we're allowed to feel sad. We're allowed to have days where we are upset or uncontrollably angry. That's just part of human nature. So when you preach the fact that you need to be endlessly happy 24/7 all the time, you truly are doing a disservice to our kiddos. You are doing a disservice to parents. You are doing a disservice to society. Think about this. 1 in 10 adults will attempt suicide, and 1 in 5 will suffer from depression. That right there statistically proves you that not everyone around you is walking around happy. Peaches, sunshine, and roses. Think of all of the harm that you're doing by just preaching, do whatever makes you feel happy. That's an unattainable goal because you are not going to be happy 24/7. That belief that it seems like everyone is pushing in today's society does the exact opposite. It breeds more unhappiness. Truth of the matter is, if you're not happy, you're not defective. If you're not unhappy, there's not something wrong with you. That is such a myth. We spend so much time being concerned about our diet, you know, at the dinner table in terms of potato chips or broccoli, but we don't put enough emphasis on our diet of the mind when it comes to what we consume. Our kids are consuming a lot of junk. When it comes to the media, social media, they're getting a lot of junk from their friends. They're hearing about drugs through movies, music, TV shows. You get the idea. Talk to your kids, even if it's hard, because otherwise they're going to keep consuming this steady diet of do you, be you, whatever makes you feel happy. Because again, at the end of the day, if you don't talk to your kiddos, now it's going to be even harder down the road, if at that point you can even have a conversation. I realize I'm not a therapist, but if you have one takeaway from me, I hope that be it, that you at least try. You at least try to talk to your kids. No, I have not been a mama for very long, but one thing that my parents did for me was always create this safe space. And again, that would be my takeaway for you, to always be that safe place for your kiddos, whether it's talking about drugs and alcohol and sex, or it's talking about gender identity, TikTok, or any other tough issue out there. Be that safe space, because if you aren't, they will find someone else to be that safe space for them, whether it's their best friend, a teacher, an administrator, a neighbor, or Taylor Swift. You certainly don't want your kiddos getting advice from their BFF or Taylor Swift, right? I don't ever want my daughter to be fearful to come to me, to tell me what's on her mind, to tell me what's in her heart, or what she's dealing with, or what her friends are dealing with. I don't ever want her to be fearful to come to her mama for advice or wisdom. Be that safe space. If you are enjoying the News Mom podcast so far, truly, I hope that you are. I know we're still raw. I know we're still young, but please subscribe to the News Mom podcast on iTunes or wherever it is that you download this podcast. Give us a 5-star rating. That truly is the most important thing that you can do for me and for all of us making this News Mom podcast possible. I say this all the time. I'm not hiding behind some crazy paywall for you to access this content. So truly, just click the subscribe button wherever you listen to this podcast and leave a rating. That would be very, very helpful and very, very much appreciated. Until next time, this is the News Mom Podcast.
She chases toddlers while chasing stories. This is News Mom.